Alrighty. Hello, everyone. I hope everybody is doing well and staying healthy. I am Brinda Kapadia, and it is an absolute honor for me to welcome all of you to another FACS webinar. I would like to start this webinar by thanking all of you for your support for FACS, and more than that, I want to thank you for supporting each other in this process. I have been monitoring all the Facebook groups and everything, our Facebook page, and I think it's so amazing to see all of you assisting each other and helping out each other, answering each other's questions, and sharing your expertise and knowledge to help one another. So thank you for doing that. This is precisely one of the reasons, as you know, why FACS was created as a 501c3 organization, which is to help one another. Like back in the day, nobody knew the answers, nobody knew how to find the information. And I mean, we have so many resources today, and this webinar is one of them. So thank you for being here today and for helping each other even outside of this space. We're happy to say that since the inception of FACS, we have worked with hundreds of PTs, and now we have established clients in Europe, Asia, Australia, North America, South America, and Africa, and we're growing, and that's thanks to you and your efforts and your support. One of the amazing PTs that I've met during my journey with FACS is Gabriel, and I'm super excited to welcome him today. Gabriel is a practicing physical therapist in the US. He graduated from the Philippines University in 2018 and moved to the US to pursue his further education and work as a physical therapist. He's licensed in New York and Texas and has worked in various inpatient and outpatient settings. He currently works at UT Southwestern Medical Center's Oncology Unit. Gabriel is also certified in sports manual therapy, dry needling, and blood flow restriction training, and also works with internationally educated physical therapists from around the world to help them prepare for their US physical therapy license exam, which is also known as NPTE, through one of the premier coaching programs, NPTE Final Frontier. We're grateful to Gabriel for volunteering his time on Sunday morning to do this webinar and to answer any questions you may have. So welcome, Gabriel.
All right, thank you so much for having me, Brenda. Thank you so much for that introduction as well. Good morning, everyone. I'm just here to tell you my story and each of the process that I took just to be licensed here in this state. Okay. I think I'm allowed to share my screen now. Would that be all right?
Yes.
Let me share my screen. All right. So this is just my PT journey from the Philippines and then to the US. Okay. That's the first slide is going to be a little bit about me and a little bit of my background regarding what setting I worked at and also the different events that I take part in. So currently I am an acute care physical therapist at UT Southwestern Medical Center. And as Brenda said, I work in the oncology unit. We deal with a lot of surgical oncology cases, bone marrow and stem cell transplants. Prior to that, I was actually working, my first job was at professional physical therapy, which was in sports outpatient ortho in New York. And then after that, I had my license transferred over to Texas, where I worked with Vista Rehab and sports medicine. In addition to those, I'm also an educator for NPT Final Frontier. I'm one of their licensed study partners alongside my colleague Kent, and we basically help students prepare for the exam, talking about specific focus topics that they are confused at or they want additional help with. Okay, and also I'm a consultant for FACS, mainly dealing with foreign students who have difficulties or have any questions regarding the licensing process, and if they have any questions regarding what courses to take based on the deficiencies we have. So here's just a little faculty headshot of me and my team from Vista. That was during our sports manual therapy certification. Okay. Here's a little bit of my educational background. So I graduated from Lyceum of the Philippines University, Batangas back in 2018. And currently I'm finishing up my transitional doctorate with University of Montana. I think it's an excellent program. Both are excellent programs, and I think they help shape me to the professional or clinician that I am today. Okay. So here are just the process I took specifically for both New York and Texas. So initially I went with NYSED. So I did my service with FCCPT, but you could actually do it at PGFNS or IERF. So those are also good services to do regarding, your licensing process. But for New York specifically, you could do FCCPT or PGFNS. Okay. So one of the first requirements they had me do was, I downloaded a few of the forms they had on the NYSED, on the FCCPT's website, which was different attestation forms. And basically you notarize them and you send them over to New York. And then that's where the whole process will get started. You'll also have to pay a certain fee, but towards the end of our presentation, I'll have a little breakdown of how much I spent for the NYSED, my licensing transfers, or whatever other expenses I made. And full disclaimer, those are the prices I paid for at the time. So prices could change, or they could have changed the past months or so. Okay. Right. So most of the stuff we look for is a notarized diploma, your degree, or certificate via like an internship certificate, just giving them a detailed look at your clinical rotations, but also they look at your syllabus as well. So talking about each subject that you've taken from the first year of your PT school to when you graduated. So they can see if you have enough credits to be, to be equivalent to basically take the test here in the US. Okay. FCCPT has it like in a pretty straightforward order, but also FSBPT has a little flow chart, which we'll go over as well, which helps, give you a good visual and overview of what to expect during the licensing process. Okay. So the NYSED service, so most of the documents to be submitted directly by the school to the credentialing agency. So what I did during my journey was the school had all my documents ready, notarized, the transcripts, the syllabus, and my clinical experience hours. They were all ready, notarized, and prepared to be sent off to the FCCPT. So I actually sent it for them, but under their name. But nowadays, I believe you don't have to wait for FCCPT to send like a request letter to the school. You're now free to just send it whenever you have those documents ready in hand. Okay. And again, the timeline for these is a little different now, because at the time that I did it back in 2019, it's a little bit quicker. But now due to COVID, they've had a little bit of a backlog for the current and previous applicants. Okay. So, and here's that flow chart that I mentioned earlier. So after you created after you went through the FCCPT service, right? You went through all that process. You went to NYSED and filled out like a Form 1 application. That's what I did, Form 1 application, paid the fee. I went in and made a FSBPT account, right? So you create a little FSBPT account. Some students, if you don't have a social security number, you would request for something called a AIN, or like an alternate identification number. And that way you could start creating your account for them. Okay. And basically what FSBPT is, that's where you can see what step you're in the credentialing licensing process. So if you're ready to take the exam, or if you're lacking some sort of documents, then you'll be able to see it from there. Okay. So this is where things get a little bit complicated, because as a foreign student, for me, I will go back a little bit. For NYSED at the time, and currently there haven't been any changes, TOEFL is typically not required to take the exam for NYSED. Okay. But for the Texas endorsement process, you normally need a TOEFL exam for most foreign students. for me, I'm a dual citizen and I went to school, high school in California. So they were able to waive that TOEFL requirement for me. But for most, I believe you still need a TOEFL exam. Okay. So here's just a little snippet of what my deficiencies are for Texas. So I'm lacking in differential diagnosis, findings that warrant referral, and supervision of support staff. Those are the deficiencies I got when I was transferring my license to Texas. So what I did first off was really scour Facebook. Where do I take these classes? That's where I found FACT actually. I purchased one of their, I used one of their services, an education advisor, and it happened to be Brunda. So what was great about that is that she walked me through each and every step, replying to all my emails, constant questions that I may have, and they gave me a good detailed overview of where I could take these classes. Like for differential diagnosis, she said you could either take it at, let's say, you could take it at Arcadia or University of St. Augustine, and she'll have a breakdown of the cost, units to expect, and what other requirements the school may have. If the school requires you to take a TOEFL exam, or when the upcoming semester will start. Now with the ECR, it roughly takes 12 to 16 weeks, which is definitely a long time. But for my specific experience, my journey, for me, fortunately, it took only 3 weeks, surprisingly. I'm not sure if it's because I had my NYSED account with FCCPT, or there could be other factors, but mine took a little bit shorter than the typical 12 to 16 weeks. Okay, so deficiencies identified, facts. So let's say I've taken my classes at Arcadia, Augustine, or any other schools. I then resubmit that for reevaluation. Now that actually took 6 to 8 weeks. So that didn't go through any faster than that, 6 to 8 weeks, and you'll get an email saying that it's equivalent now. Okay, I cut it off from this little screenshot, but it would say equivalent and it would say doctorate. That doesn't mean that you have a doctorate already. It just says it's equivalent to what units Texas is requiring. Okay. Now I have right here fingerprinting and background check. Now I did mine in New York. They have a few spots here in New York where you could have a fingerprinting done and background check, and they'll send it over to that specific jurisdiction. Okay. So really the only tough part about Texas, or really endorsing in general, is just finding the right courses to take, and getting that good guidance definitely helped me along the way. Okay, and we'll definitely address any questions regarding that towards the end. Oh, here are the breakdowns. So NYSED at the time that I did it was $515. PT application form, I know it's still $294, and then your FSPPT exam registration was $485. So after you've done all the credentialing process, the licensing process with NYSED, you wait for an APT, which is your authorization to test letter. So with that'll allow you to make a scheduled appointment with your Prometric, which is essentially a testing center. So I'm not sure how much it costs now, but at the time I did it was $85. Okay, the one that really cost the most is the ECR and the reevaluation. So the ECR is about $1,200, $1,240, and then after that is your ECR reevaluation. Now I didn't get to mention here, but obviously an additional cost will come from the courses you've taken. This depends on the person. If you've taken, if you have more deficiencies than I do or less, your experience may vary, and schools have different costs. Okay, so I think if you ever have any questions regarding specific courses or costs, I think a good consultation with FACTS is what I did to really help me jumpstart things. And it really takes away the hassle of looking through like different agencies and different schools. Also, it's built like Final Frontier, where everything's structured perfectly for everyone. Okay. So next slide right here. So this is where I start talking about just my experiences as a new grad coming into the US. Okay. So after I graduated PT school in the Philippines, I didn't have much experience in terms of, other than my clinicals, working with patients a whole lot, right, and as an actual licensed PT in the Philippines. So what I loved about working at the previous jobs I had was they had mentorship, which I think is very crucial and very vital for any up and coming PT who are still, getting their feet wet and unsure of what appropriate treatments or diagnosis to see. Okay. And with those mentorship, they help you build confidence. So for my first rotation, my first job, they actually had me cover in different locations under different clinical directors who have different specialties. I worked with one who was an OCS, orthopedic specialist, one that was more so strength and conditioning, and one was a hand therapist. And they really helped me fill the gap of whatever knowledge I was missing, whether it comes from the ACL rehab. So we know the proper ACL rehab, but I think what we're missing the gap is when they start getting to that return to sports space, where they start coming up with more complex and more like sports driven exercises. So I think a few of us were, at least for me, I was still lacking that. And I think, they helped me build my repertoire of exercises and how to properly analyze and evaluate each patient. Okay. My main takeaways was that at first, I definitely struggled a lot. Personally, I was inexperienced. I was in new country, obviously. And I think working with a lot of, PTs that are coming from very prestigious schools really pushed me to even exceed or even, exceed expectations is what I try to do, really the best that I could be. What I learned a whole lot from two of my ortho locations in dealing with different sports injuries. And what I like about them is that they give you sort of the allowance to take different continuing education courses, whether it's dry needling, blood flow restriction, different manual therapy, or just different webinars to attend to really build up your confidence, your evaluation skills, right? What I could have done better, I think what I could have done better is improving my patient education, because at the end of the day, we could give all these exercises to our patients. They could do them, but if you're not really properly educating these patients on what to expect, why you're doing these particular exercise, I think it'll sort of won't have that personal connection or that touch for each patient. And I think just having that good relationship with a patient really elevates and increases compliance all throughout. Okay. So right now, this is a picture of our building that I took outside. So I work in acute care now. Since this is essentially a medical school and a sort of a teaching hospital, they really emphasize education. So each employee has to go through a very long sort of orientation or a precepting process. So my first floor, which is I'm only a month in, is in oncology. So they pair you up with a mentor who is specialized in that field, and they put you through like about a month of really one-on-one co-treating, going through different diagnoses, talking about line management, chart reviews, and really the whole 9 yards. So definitely this was a big jump from where I was at sports outpatient to more so really acute and dealing with a very unique population. Okay. And just another thing I'm still learning is working well with an interdisciplinary team. So we have a very a EMR called Epic. I think a lot of hospitals or clinics use that, where we communicate with doctors, communicate with OTs and nurses regarding the patient's treatment. And that's where I'm starting to learn, communicating better with doctors regarding the patient's progress, or if there's anything else I could recommend, like discharge recommendations. If a patient I think would benefit from other subacute placement for safe discharge at home, I could make recommendations like that, or just recommending a different equipment for home, a walker, rollator, or cane, whatever it may be. Okay. And same thing as my previous locations, there's really a big emphasis on continuing education. because as a PT, it's obviously a lifelong learning process. So constantly improving, constantly evolving, I think will help really as a catalyst for improvement there. So constant learning and just improving on your craft. So I'm very blessed to be in this current situation I am now with this location, because definitely everyone on the team is here to support you. They're not here to judge, but they're here to make sure that you're at your best and ensuring patients is functioning efficiently, and patients are recovering and making sure that they are educated on what to do and what not to do regarding their particular condition, and hopefully safely discharge them for home. Okay, that's a little background there from acute care. Definitely a unique experience. I've never had really any acute care background in the Philippines. I had some, but not to the extent that this hospital was providing me with all sorts of different equipment to use, and just the freedom and autonomy that I have as a PT, and just being able to talk confidently with the doctors regarding what I see in the charts and what I think I could recommend is definitely a big eye opener. Okay. All right. So here's just a little quick snippet of what I went through with FAC. So here's so whenever you apply for a FAC advisor, they give you a little breakdown of what to expect. So I didn't have everything on there, but this is what they gave back to me. This is what it would look like. So it'll have your deficiencies and then your total credits that you have. And at the bottom of that, it'll have the different schools and locations where you can do it at. Okay. One thing I liked about them is they're very quick to reply. So whenever I email Brunda, I usually expect a reply within like 10, 15 minutes, 2 minutes at most, too. And she's very quick. She really walks me through each and every step, no matter how mundane or how simple the questions are. They're always there to help you every step of the way, which I thought was a very, very big plus for me, because you're working, right? You have all these documentations to write, all these patients to take care of. It's a different, definitely less stress on you to have someone basically providing you with a guide, and you don't have to work as hard to go through these classes. Okay, so that was basically it for my journey, and I think we should be open to any sort of questions that either me or Brunda or the team can help you out with. So thank you. I think this is where we start the Q&A.
Yes, Gabriel, give me 1 second. It's great. There are a lot of questions in chat, and we will get to them one by one. All right, let's get started. So I'm going to answer the questions. We're going to answer the questions mainly in the order that they were received, just to make sure that we can address all the questions. And Gabe and I are both happy to answer your questions. And if you have questions, you can feel free to keep them coming. Okay, so Gabe, the first question is from Vaishali. She asks that she's done her bachelor's in physiotherapy from India, and she holds an active license in Michigan. She has been working in Canada for the past 3 years and would like to get her visa screen certificate, for which an MPT or a master's or a doctorate degree is required. So can you recommend some good courses or universities for that?
So with that, I know in the US, everything now is the entry level should be a doctorate. So I think it would be good to pursue that over a MPT at the moment. Not that MPT isn't good, it's just that right now TDPT is just where DPTs were entry level at. In terms of a good university, you could definitely, there's a lots of them, but I would just suggest University of Montana, Scholastica, Arcadia is a good one. And there's definitely a big list of them, but the ones that I mentioned, Montana, Scholastica, Arcadia, are definitely solid choices to go to pursue. And we also had a webinar discussing the different services or breakdown of what each school does for their students.
Thank you for sharing that, Gabe. And I'm going to have one of the team members, Derek, if you can share the link, the YouTube link to that webinar, that would be super helpful. We did do a webinar where we invited guest speakers from various universities, and they spoke about all of their programs, the cost involved, the time involved, everything was included. So make sure you check that webinar, check out that webinar. It's on our YouTube page, it's on the FACS YouTube page. I agree with Gabe. I think Arcadia, University of Montana, College of St. Scholastica, University of St. Augustine, these are good schools. A lot of internationally educated physical therapists do their transitional doctorate degree from those specific schools. Feel free to send us an email if you do plan to pursue your transitional doctorate. We can maybe help you with more information. We do partner with schools as well to do individual courses for your course requirements too. So we're happy to assist you with that. All right. Okay, looking at the next question. This question is from Nazar, and Nazar asks, is there any difference where to do type 1 for immigration at FCCPT or CGFNS? Because as Mr. Cordero told, you need to fulfill credit requirement and FCCPT issue when you have 170 and FCCPT has 210 credits. He's done his ECR with FCCPT and has gotten 164 credits, and you'd like to get your healthcare worker certificate soon. Gabe, do you want me to take that question, or would you like to respond to that?
I'll defer to you. I'll defer to you for this one.
Okay, sure. So yes, ideally to get a healthcare worker certificate or a visa screen certificate, you can either do it, you can do your evaluation from either CGFNS or FCCPT. FCCPT does require 210 credits, CGFNS usually 170 credits. So if you do have any specific course deficits, like say you're lacking wound debridement, or if you're lacking supervision of support staff, then if you're lacking that in your first report, you will most likely lack that even in your second report. But if you're just looking at the number of credits, CGFNS will most likely have fewer credits. Both of them do require you to have either a master's degree or higher, so a master's or a doctorate degree in any field. But yeah, CGFNS does have fewer credits. So yes, I hope that answers your question, Nazar. All right, going to the next question. It's by Ansi. She asks, when we had worked many years experience and also are licensed in another country, is it necessary to submit license verification, or does it become optional?
So that's a very good question. I get that quite a bit. So that's a very state-specific requirement, and it's for select states. So we have on our website like a breakdown of what each state requires. So I think that'd be good. I think we'll post that right in the chat as well. But it's a very state-specific question. So each state is different.
I completely agree. If it is a state-specific requirement that you have to submit your license from your home country, it doesn't matter how many years of work experience you have, 1 year or 10 years, you have to submit proof of licensure. So yeah. Okay, the next question is from Chapman. He asks, I'm a PT from Hong Kong. Where can I look for EB3 visa jobs? Any particular agents that help us do EB3 visas? Chapman, we do have, again, Gabe, I can take this question, but Chapman, we do have, I don't know if you watched one of our webinars. We had an immigration attorney who presented for us, and he can answer more. He can answer your questions that are specific to visas, and feel free to send us an email for more details regarding that. In addition to that, if you're specifically looking at job hunting, we do have life after NPTE, and again, I can have one of the team members post the link to that. We do have life after NPTE, which is a part of Final Frontier, which can assist you with finding jobs and with job placements and things like that. FACS directly is not involved with that, but we do have contacts, and we're happy to connect you and make sure your questions are answered regarding that. Okay. I have another question from Vaishali. She asks, if I do TDPT, then will TOEFL be waived?
So that's another common question that we get and I get. So for type 1, yes, it can be waived if you've taken a TDPT course or a school.
I agree. So yes, TDPT can be like, so if you're talking, Vaishali, with respect to type 1 licensure, yes, TDPT can waive TOEFL if it is a state-specific requirement. However, so say for example, there are states like Texas and then New Jersey. These are state-specific requirements, so your TOEFL will not be waived for those specific states. But for type 1 purposes, yes, they can be waived. Type 1 or visa screen purposes, it can be waived. I hope that answers your question. The next question is from Geeta. She asks, when should we start the ECR review and reevaluation process? I think Gabe kind of went over that in his presentation, but Gabe, do you want to just quickly give an overview?
Process. So usually do an ECR and reevaluation if you are going to transfer your license to a different state, or you're trying to get licensed at a state that specifically requires an ECR, which is almost most of the states, correct? Unlike NY said, which has their own credentialing body, so you really won't need an ECR for that. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, what I was actually reading the next question, but I apologize.
So regarding the ECR, if a state, so let's say you're trying to transfer a license from a different state, let's say New York to Texas or any other state, then that's when you start doing an ECR review. Or if you're trying to actually apply for a license in the state just to take the exam, you'll do another ECR review. The reevaluation is when you start after the ECR, you get a list of deficiencies. You've taken those deficiencies at whatever school you find, then you do a reevaluation to see if now, after taking those classes, if it's now equivalent, or you'll be allowed to take the test or transfer your license.
I agree. So ECR usually, unless you're applying for New York or any of the type 1 states, ECR will be your first step in this whole process. And then once you do your ECR evaluation, you will get a report that says either you have course deficiencies or you don't. If you don't, you're all set. You don't need a reevaluation. If you do have course deficiencies, then you will have to take those courses at various PT schools in the US, and then you will apply for a reevaluation. And then you can take your license exam. So I hope that answers your question. I have another question from Dia. She says, first of all, thank you for such an amazing webinar. You're welcome, Dia. And thank you, Gabriel, for sharing more about your journey. She says, I'm waiting for NY seat completion and to allow me to sit for NPT. It's been 3 weeks since I applied. I wanted to know, when can I start preparing for NPT and join Final Frontier? Also, is there a chance to have lacking credits? So Dia, I will let Gabriel talk about NPT preparation because he is also an instructor and he works with students, helping them prepare for their license exam. And regarding your second question, where it says, are there any chances to have any lacking credits? Most of the students from India usually don't have credit deficiencies, especially for the state of New York. Every once in a while, someone might have. So the chances are low, but let's just keep your fingers crossed. Most likely you won't have it. But... Go ahead, Gabriel.
No, you can continue. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
So I'd like to add on that for the Philippine students as well, there's usually no deficiencies for most foreign grads. The foreign PT students or from the Philippines usually don't have any deficiencies for New York, nor do they usually require TOEFL to take the exam. For a question regarding NPT preparations. So the good thing about NPT Final Frontier is you have almost a year that you're able to use the account. So it's like an 11-week program. It's really up to you to when you start. But I would suggest starting, if you haven't really practiced or reading a whole lot, I think starting earlier will definitely put you at an advantage. Because the fact that we're able to, that you have a year validity of your account gives you an ample amount of time to prepare. So I think starting early is pretty good starting off point.
I completely agree. And again, I can have a team member share the link in chat, or I can do it for you. And while I do that, I do have a message from Shika. She says, Gabriel, your hair is really cute.
Oh, thank you. My hair?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
thank
Going to the next question. This question is from Silverline. She asks, hello, I'm a Filipino licensed PT in New York, and I have a CGFNS visa screen. I already passed my TOEFL in 2019. I'm planning to transfer my license from New York to Texas. Is my TOEFL still valid, or do I need to take TOEFL again? So, Silverline, your TOEFL is valid for up to 2 years. If you did submit your TOEFL scores to FCCPT, that is valid for 5 years. So I think in this case, since you already have your documents and everything, I would recommend you to email the Texas State Board. They are fabulous with responding to emails. I've personally been in touch with them, and you can just double check with them. But as far as you had submitted your reports to FCCPT, I think they should be good for about 5 years. Okay. So Silverline's follow-up question is, are you familiar with ICD, which is International Consultants of Delaware Evaluation? And it is cheaper compared to ECR. It's only $400 to $500. Silverline, yes, you are right. ICD, IERF, CGFNS are other credentialing agencies that a lot of physical therapy students use. And absolutely, the one recommendation I would give you is you can just make sure that the state that you're applying to accepts the evaluation from these specific agencies. As far as they do that, absolutely, you can go with ICD as well. That should be fine. And yes, it is cheaper than the ECR evaluation. And I think some of their logos were on Gabriel's screens as well, in case you guys want to look it up later on. Okay, I have this other question, and I don't know how to pronounce your name, but I'm just going to read the question. Which one makes sense as a foreign trained PT? Taking a master's degree or a transitional DPT? Taking a master's degree or a transitional DPT? A master's degree can provide 1 to 3 years of OPT. What happens after completing transitional DPT, and what is the difference? Gabriel, let me know if you want to answer this, or if you'd like for me to take this question.
So, like, what do they recommend? If she's asking if it's, what would I recommend?
Yeah, would you recommend masters or TDPT?
I think personally, I would recommend a TDPT, because it's, like I said earlier, doctorate is now entry level here in the States, and she was asking what happens afterwards, right? What happens afterwards? So after completing your transitional doctorate, depending on the school, it can take 1.5 to 2 years. You'll have a DPT, essentially credentials. You'll be a doctor of physical therapy. And unlike most doctorate programs, DPT programs in the States, it's all online, so you don't have to do any clinicals. It's just bridging the gap of what you're missing from your undergrad to get that DPT sort of credentials.
I agree. So the transitional doctorate will help you cover most, if not all, of your deficits. For me personally, I did my master's and then I also did my transitional doctorate. There are various pros and cons to both. And again, I'm going to highly recommend you. We had actually done another webinar as well on this specific topic, where we spoke about, should you pursue a master's program or should you pursue a transitional doctorate program? Feel free to go to our YouTube page. It's called faxpt.org, and that video should be available to you. We did answer this exact same question. What I usually recommend is that it really depends on your end goal. Most of the online TDPT programs are great because they help you fulfill a lot of course deficits, but because they're online, you're not really working on your hands-on skills or your manual skills or things like that. Versus a lot of master's program, like you correctly mentioned, have OPT and they're usually on site. So you do learn like stuff in lab or like with respect to your clinicals, and it is more of a hands-on approach. So I think they both have their own pros and cons, and I would recommend you, like, for more details, like we can have an hour-long discussion about that, but I would strongly recommend you to check out that video too.
I mean, she's definitely correct. You know, if you're someone who really wants to get your hands on and really get more of the clinical or just being in class, I think that's a good choice. But again, there's pros and cons. If you just want to, complete the TDPT program, and then regarding you want to get more hands-on stuff, I think just pursuing different continuing education courses, supplementing your TDPT would be just as good. I just realized there's a typo in the slide. So I was looking at questions. All right.
Okay. All right. There's another question. It's by someone named Fax. Great name, Fax. They ask, how long does Gabriel recommend to review for NPTE as a foreign trained PT? And they have a follow-up question, which is, are there any states that allow you to take NPTE without a TDPT degree?
Oh, okay. So for me personally, when I actually took the exam twice. So the first time I took it, I didn't really have a whole lot of time to study. I had probably probably like eight weeks or so. I didn't have like a whole lot of a guidance to it. Like the materials I have were not sufficient. But with preparing as a foreign grad with NPT Final Frontier, since it is roughly an 11 to 12-week program, that's more than enough time because we provide with whatever readings you need to take, like whatever readings you need to look into. The lectures, we definitely provide everything regarding the PDFs, specific pages of those, so that students don't get burnt out when they're studying, because there's often been lots of cases where students will just read, but they probably won't come up on the exam. So we try to make sure that most of the readings to be specifically asked students to do are very exam sensitive, and all you really need to know for the exam. What was the other question?
Is there any state that does not require you to have a TDPT degree to take the license exam?
So correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you don't need a DPT to really register for the exam, correct? I think the DPT comes from, when you pass your exam and you really want to be a little more marketable to employers, and really buff up your resume a little bit, and just for continuing education purposes. But you don't really need a DPT to take the exams for any state.
I completely agree. There are no states that currently, like, yes, it's a proposed law that everybody should ideally have a doctorate degree. That's a proposal, at least for foreign trained PTs. That is not mandatory as of yet. Can the rules change in the future? Yes, 100%. Maybe next year they'll say, yes, you should have a doctorate degree. But as of today, as of right now, it's not mandatory for you to have a transitional doctorate to take your license exam. Yes, okay. I'm going through the question. I did share the link to our YouTube page. So for people who want to check them out, definitely go ahead and do that. I did have a question from somebody who is from Saudi Arabia. They say that I'm a licensed PT from the Philippines, as well as here in Saudi Arabia. For FCC PT, do I need to send them my license here in Saudi Arabia for credentialing as well? Initially I have a New York license and had done NYC credentialing, but I did not put my Saudi license credential details back then. Is it a must to include my license here in Saudi? I plan to transfer from New York to Texas.
So from that, since he's already licensed in New York, I don't think it's a necessary requirement to fasten that credential, correct? Because all they're looking at from New York to Texas is your education, like whatever you're lacking in college, like credit-wise. Am I correct?
Yeah, so ideally, if you've done any additional coursework, I would recommend you to add that when you do endorse your license from New York to Texas. And honestly, I would recommend you to include your Saudi Arabia licensing details as well, because say in the future you want to move to another state, and if that specific state has a state-specific requirement that we need your licenses from all the different boards or countries, then at least you will have submitted your documents in advance. So that is something I would recommend for sure. Okay, I think that kind of covers. I'm going through my chat. It's full, but I think we have covered all of the questions that were here. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us today. And I see a lot of thank yous in chat. You're very welcome. And thanks to you too again for joining us today. Gabriel, it's been a pleasure knowing you as like on the other side, and now I love your passion and your enthusiasm to give back to the internationally educated physical therapy community, whether it's through teaching through Final Frontier, or whether it is just assisting students on Facebook, or doing free webinars, or just consulting, just being a consultant for everyone, like especially from the especially for PTs from the Philippines. So thank you for your time and your efforts and sharing your experiences. And for everyone who joined today, I see a lot of familiar names. And for all those who are new, thank you so much for joining us today and for all your support. And we will see you at the next webinar.